The rescue, HFY Sci-Fi Story, the void of space was silent, broken only by the hum of the human patrol ship Aegis. Lieutenant Mason sat at the front console, scanning the dark expanse for any signals. It was supposed to be a quiet patrol near the border of alien territory. But quiet never lasted long out here. Suddenly, the radar beeped, a faint echo of movement just beyond sensor range. "Captain, I'm picking up something," Mason said, narrowing his eyes at the flickering blip. The captain leaned forward, voice steady. "Put it on screen." A small metallic object floated aimlessly. Turning slowly in the cold black, it was an escape pod, old, damaged, and carrying weak life signs. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Alien pods were rarely friendly, and even less often were they harmless. But Mason felt something strange, a pull he couldn't explain. "Permission to retrieve it," he said firmly. The captain hesitated, then nodded. "All right, Lieutenant. But keep your rifle ready." Minutes later, the pod was pulled into the Aegis's hangar. The air around it shimmering with frost, Mason approached carefully, his gloved hand brushing away the frost from the window. Inside lay a young alien girl, pale-skinned, silver-haired, her armor cracked and burned. She was unconscious, yet her face carried the calmness of someone not afraid. Her breathing was faint but steady. "She's alive," Mason said quietly, and the medical team rushed forward. They carried her to the infirmary, hooking her to oxygen and scanners. Her vitals were strange, not like any species the humans had encountered before. Her cells seemed to shift when light touched them, as if her body refused to be fully seen. Hours passed, and Mason stayed by her bedside. Something about her presence filled the air. A strange hum, like energy vibrating in the metal walls. He couldn't explain it, but the Aegis began to experience odd glitches. Lights flickered, sensors malfunctioned, and yet the ship itself felt alive. The engineers cursed and blamed the systems, but Mason knew it started the moment she was brought aboard. When she finally opened her eyes, they were not the eyes of a fragile girl. They were silver like mercury, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her gaze locked onto Mason's, sharp and curious. "Where am I?" she asked softly, her voice carrying both confusion and authority. "You're safe," Mason said gently. "You were floating in space. We rescued you." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "A human," she whispered, almost amused. "How unexpected," Mason frowned, unsure how to respond. "Do you remember your name?" She tilted her head, as if considering whether he deserved an answer. Finally, she said, "Names are complicated, but you can call me Lyra." The way she said it sent a chill through him, like the word carried more than meaning, like it carried power. He nodded slowly. "All right, Lyra, you're safe now. We'll get you home." Her expression darkened slightly. "Home?" she repeated. "You wouldn't want to take me there." Before he could ask what she meant, the ship trembled, alarms flaring. "Unknown energy spike." The pilot shouted, "Coming from the med bay." Mason looked at her, and in that instant her eyes shone brighter, silver light pulsing like a heartbeat. The scanners went haywire, monitors flashing symbols no one could translate. "Shut it down." The captain barked over comms, but Lyra just watched the chaos calmly, a small knowing smirk on her lips. "Your machines don't like me very much," she said softly. "They can feel what I am." Mason grabbed her arm. Not in anger, but fear. "What are you?" he asked quietly. She leaned closer, her gaze never breaking. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." For a moment, the entire ship went still, the hum of engines fading to silence. Every light dimmed, every screen went black. Only her glowing eyes remained in the dark, watching him, studying him. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything came back online. The captain's voice crackled over the radio. "Engineering reports full system reboot. What happened down there?" Mason didn't answer, his eyes still locked on the alien girl sitting calmly on the bed. She smiled again, that same unsettling calmness in her face. "Don't worry, Lieutenant," she said in a voice that seemed far older than her appearance. "You humans are safe. For now." He didn't know why, but her tone made the hairs on his neck rise. He felt as if she wasn't talking to him, but to something beyond him, something vast, ancient, and waiting. As he turned to leave, Lyra whispered under her breath, "You humans have no idea who I truly am." The stars outside the ship's viewport shimmered, bending faintly as if space itself listened, and for the first time, Mason felt the weight of something far greater than any war, something that had been sleeping for eons, now awake because of her. The human patrol ship drifted quietly through the void once more, but everyone aboard the Aegis knew that the moment they brought her on board, humanity's fate had already begun to change. The warning. HFY Sci-Fi Story days passed aboard the Aegis, but no one felt at peace ever since the alien girl, Lyra, had awakened. Strange things began to happen across the ship. Doors opened before anyone touched them. Lights dimmed when she entered a room, and the engines sometimes hummed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The crew whispered about her in the hallways, calling her the Ghost Princess, though no one dared say it near her. Lieutenant Mason kept watch, his curiosity battling his fear. He often found her standing by the viewing glass, staring into the endless stars. "You've been quiet," he said one day. Approaching her cautiously, she didn't turn, only smiled faintly. "I listen better when I'm quiet." Mason crossed his arms. "To what?" "To everything," she replied. "Your ship hums like a frightened child. Space screams around us. The war is closer than you think." Her words chilled him. There hadn't been any war reports for months, but before he could respond, the comm officer's voice broke through. "Lieutenant, long-range sensors just picked up multiple warp signatures. Unknown origin." Mason looked back at Lyra, but she only closed her eyes as if she already knew. "They've found me," she whispered, almost like an admission. "Who?" Mason demanded. Her silver eyes opened again, glowing faintly. "The ones who believe I betrayed them." The captain ordered the crew to battle stations. Weapons powered up, shields raised, and every console flashed red. The radar showed 3 enormous ships closing in fast. Alien designs unlike anything in human records. "Message incoming," the comms officer said, his voice trembling. "They're demanding we surrender the heir of the Imperial line." The captain frowned. "What line?" Everyone turned toward Lyra, but she remained silent. Mason took a cautious step forward. "Lyra, what are they talking about?" Her lips curved into a sad smile. "They want their throne back." Before anyone could react, a massive explosion shook the ship. A warning shot. Energy surged through the Aegis, sparks flying across the bridge. The alien fleet wasn't trying to destroy them, not yet. They were waiting for her. Lyra calmly stood up, her voice steady. "They will not stop." "Not until I'm dead or in chains," Mason grabbed her arm. "Then tell us what you are. Help us fight." For the first time, her calm broke, her eyes filled with pain. "You humans don't understand. You're not supposed to be part of this war," she said, her voice trembling. "Then why are they coming here?" he pressed. "Because I hid among you," she said, her gaze piercing. "And because I told them the truth and that humanity is not what they think," the captain shouted over the intercom. "Incoming hail, they want an answer." Mason looked at her, searching for any hint of deception, but all he saw was fear mixed with defiance. "What will they do if we refuse?" he asked. She looked out the window again, her voice cold as steel. "They'll burn your world to find me." The captain's face appeared on the monitor. "Lieutenant Mason, secure the prisoner. We're turning her over." Mason froze. "Sir, she's not a threat." "She's a liability," the captain snapped. "That fleet out there is armed with weapons we can't even scan. We're not dying for a stranger." But Mason couldn't obey. Something deep inside him screamed that handing her over was wrong. He turned off his comms, locking the door behind him. Lyra watched him in silence, her expression unreadable. "You would risk your world for me?" she asked softly. "I don't even know who you are," Mason replied, "but I know what we stand for. We don't abandon people just because they're inconvenient." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she looked up at him with tears in her glowing eyes. "You remind me of the first humans we created," she whispered. Mason blinked. "What did you just say?" But before she could answer, the Aegis shook again, harder this time. "They've started firing," shouted the pilot through the intercom. "Shields are collapsing." Mason rushed to the window. 3 alien ships surrounded them like predators. Energy beams tore through the darkness, lighting up the stars. Lyra took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I can stop them." "But you won't like how," Mason stared at her. "Do it." She closed her eyes and the temperature in the room dropped. Every metal surface began to hum, the ship's core glowing white-hot. The alien fleet paused, as if they sensed something ancient awaken. Then her voice echoed. Not just in the room, but through every frequency in space. "Stand down," she commanded, her tone carrying the weight of 1,000 rulers. The attacking ships froze mid-fire, their engines flickering. Their weapons going dark, the crew gasped, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. Mason turned toward her. Her skin glowed faintly now, her eyes almost blinding. He took a hesitant step back. "Lyra, what did you do?" She looked at him, her expression calm but tired. "I gave them a reminder," she said softly, "of who their empress truly is." The ship went silent again. Only the sound of Mason's heartbeat filling the air. Outside, the alien fleet slowly began to retreat, disappearing into the stars. For now, humanity was safe. But Mason knew this was only the beginning. As the lights flickered back to normal, Lyra turned to him and whispered, "Your kind was never meant to kneel, Lieutenant. And soon you'll learn why." The chase. HFY Sci-Fi Story. The stars were no longer silent. After Lyra's command forced the alien fleet to retreat, the crew of the Aegis had only one question. Who was she truly? But no one dared ask, not after what they had just witnessed. She had stopped an armada with a whisper, bent the will of ships across light years, and yet she looked fragile, almost human. Lieutenant Mason couldn't rest, his mind replaying every second of what happened. The way she glowed, the way her words carried power that machines obeyed. Even the ship's AI refused to analyze her readings. Reporting only. Access denied, authority level unknown. And for the first time, Mason realized their technology, everything humanity had built, felt small before her. The next morning cycle, the captain's voice came through the intercom, sharp and urgent. "All crew prepare for immediate evacuation. Unknown fleet approaching again." The ship trembled as distant explosions rippled across the void. Lyra opened her eyes slowly, whispering, "They didn't retreat. They regrouped." Mason ran into the control deck, his uniform still half-fastened. "Status," he shouted. 5 dreadnoughts inbound, moving faster than any known drive tech, yelled the pilot. "They're using something unnatural." Lyra appeared behind them, calm but pale. "They've activated the royal beacon," she said. "They're calling my father." Everyone froze. "Your father?" Mason repeated. She nodded. "He's not coming to rescue me, Lieutenant. He's coming to erase me." The captain turned sharply. "We're not sticking around for introductions, Helm. Evasive pattern Delta 9. The Aegis roared forward, diving into a nearby asteroid field, massive rocks tumbling past like ancient giants. The alien dreadnoughts followed, their weapons cutting through stone and silence alike. Mason strapped in beside Lyra, his heart pounding as gravity shifted with every violent maneuver. "You said you could stop them," he yelled over the alarms. She looked out the window, eyes glimmering like molten silver. "Not without consequence." "What consequence?" he demanded. "If I use my power again, they'll find out I'm still alive, and then they'll send the prime hunters." Explosions echoed through the hull as asteroids shattered around them. The captain barked, "We can't take much more of this." Mason gritted his teeth. "We need another way out." Lyra turned toward him, a spark of something fierce in her gaze. "There is a way, but it's forbidden." The engine screamed as she placed her hands on the console. Her silver veins glowed, merging with the ship's core. The Aegis's systems went haywire. Lights flickered, metal warped. The AI stuttered in confusion. "Mason!" The captain shouted. "What is she doing?" Before Mason could answer, the ship lurched violently. A tunnel of light opened ahead, a distortion in space unlike any jump gate humanity had ever seen. Lyra's voice echoed across the deck. "Hold on. This is going to hurt." The ship shot forward, every molecule stretching, twisting, burning. Crew members screamed as alarms blared, hull integrity collapsing, then silence. When the light faded, they were floating above a dead moon, cold, cracked and empty. The stars outside seemed older here, their glow dim and distant. Mason unbuckled himself slowly, ears ringing. "Where are we?" Lyra collapsed to her knees, blood, silver and shimmering, dripping from her nose. "We're safe," she whispered weakly. For now, Mason helped her up, his tone soft but firm. "You're bleeding." She smiled faintly. "That's the price of forbidden travel." He looked out the viewport and no sign of pursuit, no comm signals, only silence. "Why bring us here?" he asked, her eyes softened. "Because this moon remembers." They landed the ship on the surface, the dust rising like ghosts. Lyra led Mason outside, the air thin and dry. The ground beneath them was etched with massive carvings, symbols older than both human and alien language. "What is this place?" he asked. She touched one of the glowing symbols, her voice trembling. This was humanity's first cradle. Before Earth, Mason stared at her, disbelief and awe mixing in his chest. That's impossible, he said. Lyra looked at him, a sad smile on her lips. You think you came from Earth, Lieutenant? But Earth came from here. Her words echoed across the ancient ruins, and for a moment the air shimmered like heat haze. Visions flickered before Mason's eyes. Massive human-like beings of light, standing among stars, their eyes filled with fire. He stumbled back, his breathing heavy. What are you saying? Lyra's expression turned grave. Your species wasn't born. You were made. The Empire feared what you might become, so they buried the truth. Her voice broke as she continued. And I betrayed them because I saw what you could be. What you were meant to be. Before Mason could speak, the sky above cracked open. Blue light flooded the horizon, a warp signature. Massive and near. They found us, she said quietly. Her silver hair catching the glow. Mason raised his rifle out of instinct, even knowing it wouldn't matter. Lyra placed a trembling hand on his chest. You can't fight them with weapons, Lieutenant, she whispered. You'll need faith. The ground trembled as alien warships descended, their shadows covering the ruins. Lyra turned toward the incoming fleet, her eyes burning brighter than before. Mason grabbed her arm. You'll die if you use your power again. She smiled, tired but fearless, then let them see what they tried to erase. The scene froze in the light of the descending ships, the human soldier and the alien empress standing side by side, and above them, the stars began to pulse, as if something ancient had awakened, watching, waiting, remembering humanity's true origin. The revelation, HFY Sci-Fi Story. The moon trembled beneath their feet. The alien fleet loomed above like a swarm of dark gods, their ships forming a shadow across the stars. Mason stood beside Lyra, his pulse pounding in his ears, his rifle useless against what floated overhead. But Lyra wasn't afraid. Her expression was calm, almost sorrowful. They're afraid of this place, she murmured, her silver eyes reflecting the distant fire of thrusters. Mason frowned. Afraid? They're the ones with the guns. She shook her head. Not guns, Lieutenant. Memories. Her gaze shifted toward the glowing ruins beneath them. This moon was humanity's first laboratory. Mason blinked, unsure he heard her right. Laboratory? Lyra nodded slowly, her voice heavy with regret. We made you here long before your kind called themselves human. Her words struck him like a physical blow. You're lying, he said, though his voice trembled. Her hand brushed the stone beside her, and ancient symbols lit up, forming a map of galaxies. Images flickered, human silhouettes emerging from starlight, chains of DNA twisting into fire. Mason stared, unable to look away. You were designed to survive where others could not, she said quietly. To feel, to adapt, to defy extinction. Defy? Mason repeated. Lyra smiled sadly. You were never meant to bow to empires. That's why they fear you. Her words echoed through the ruins, vibrating through the air like the hum of power long dormant. The alien ships above adjusted position, their weapons locking on the surface. They're charging plasma cannons, Mason warned. Lyra looked up, unflinching. They will not fire. Not yet? How can you be sure? He asked. She met his eyes. Because I am still their empress, even in exile. My command is written into their blood. The sky rumbled as lightning tore across the thin atmosphere. Her power stirred again, faint ripples of silver energy spreading from her feet into the ground. The ruins responded, glowing brighter, ancient circuits coming alive beneath the dust. What's happening? Mason shouted over the rising wind. The truth, she answered, her voice now layered. One tone human, the other something cosmic. The air shimmered, and the ruins projected a vision into the sky, a memory carved into light itself. It showed towering beings, humanoid, radiant, sculpting life from starlight and code. Mason realized with horror that they looked human. These are your creators, Lyra said softly. They built the empire, and they built you. But why, he asked, his voice breaking. Because they wanted a species free of fear, she said. A species that could rise again when everything else fell. The vision shifted, showing the creators arguing, fighting, destroying one another in wars that tore stars apart. When the dust settled, humanity was left forgotten, exiled to a small blue world. Your people forgot what they were meant to be, she whispered. but not what they were. Suddenly, a blast struck the surface nearby, throwing dust and debris into the air. The alien fleet had lost patience. Mason covered Lyra as the ground shook violently. "You said they wouldn't fire," he yelled. Lyra coughed, silver blood staining her lips. "My father must be leading them." She stumbled but forced herself upright, her body glowing like molten metal. Mason grabbed her shoulders. "You'll die if you fight." Her gaze softened. "Death isn't the end for my kind. It's the release of memory." He shook his head, desperation rising in his voice. "There has to be another way." Lyra smiled faintly. "There is, but it belongs to you." Before he could respond, the ruins began to pulse, rhythmic, alive, echoing Mason's heartbeat. Lyra looked around, realization dawning. "It's responding to you." "What do you mean?" he asked. "You're human," she said, tears forming in her glowing eyes. "You are the key to everything they feared." She took his hand and placed it on the central stone. A surge of light burst from beneath their feet, shooting into the sky like a beacon. In orbit, the alien ships faltered, their systems glitching, their weapons flickering off. "The signal," Lyra gasped. "It's awakening the human code, buried deep within the stars." Mason felt energy coursing through him. Hot, ancient, overwhelming. "What is this?" he groaned. Lyra smiled weakly. "The inheritance of your kind." The ground split open, revealing metallic veins beneath the rock. Ancient technology older than her empire. Massive machines began to rise. Half-buried titans humming with power. Mason stepped back in awe. "What are they?" he whispered. Lyra's voice trembled. "The Sentinels are the first human guardians, built to protect the Creator's legacy." The alien ships above opened fire again, but the blast never reached the surface. The Sentinels raised their arms, creating shimmering shields of light that covered the moon. The fleet's attack scattered harmlessly into dust. Mason stared in disbelief. "They're protecting us." Lyra collapsed into his arms, her light fading. "I told you," she whispered, her voice faint. "Humanity was never meant to kneel." He held her tightly, her silver blood warm against his armor. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Her final words were barely a breath. "Now, you remember who you are?" The Sentinels stood tall, their eyes blazing like stars reborn. Above them, the alien fleet hesitated. For the first time in centuries, they were afraid, and deep within the ruins, something vast stirred, an ancient heartbeat awakening beneath the surface. A voice older than empires whispered across the cosmos. "The Awakening, HFY Sci-Fi Story." The ground shook like a sleeping giant stirring from a dream. The ruins glowed brighter than sunlight, beams of golden energy rising from the cracks in the moon's surface. Mason shielded his eyes, his armor trembling as the air turned electric. Above, the alien fleet wavered, their massive dreadnoughts losing control as their engines screamed against a force older than physics itself. Lyra lay in his arms, her breathing shallow, her silver eyes flickering like fading stars. He whispered urgently, "Stay with me, Lyra." She smiled weakly. "You don't understand, Lieutenant. This is how it was always meant to end." Her voice was soft, almost peaceful, but Mason felt the weight of centuries behind it. The Sentinels around them moved, each step sending ripples of gravity through the moon's surface. They formed a circle around the ruins, their colossal bodies channeling light into the sky. "The code is awakening," Lyra said faintly. "Your creators buried it deep within the human mind. A memory of power waiting to be remembered." Mason stared at the towering machines. "And now it's awake because of you." Lyra shook her head. "No, because of you." She reached up, her glowing fingers touching the side of his face. "When I first saw you, I felt something strange. Not fear, not defiance, but recognition." Mason swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Recognition?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You remind me of them. The ones who first defied the stars." The air grew denser, the moon's gravity shifting as if reality itself was bending. Above, the alien fleet opened fire once more, and desperate, terrified, blind. But their energy blasts dissolved before reaching the surface, shattered by unseen barriers. The sky shimmered, and for the first time, the stars themselves seemed to move, forming patterns, runes, glowing human constellations. Mason looked up in awe. "What is happening?" Lyra's fading voice answered, "Your kind is remembering what it means to be alive." A low hum filled the air, deep and rhythmic, like a heartbeat resonating through the galaxy. The sentinels raised their arms again, this time pointing toward the heavens, and from each a beam of golden light erupted, piercing the alien formation above. The dreadnought shattered silently, breaking apart like ash carried by wind. The entire fleet vanished in seconds, erased without fire, without sound, as if the universe itself had rejected them. Mason stared in disbelief, his voice barely a whisper. "They're gone." Lyra closed her eyes, a single silver tear sliding down her cheek. "Peace is never free, Lieutenant." The moon trembled again, and deep below, Mason felt something stir. Not machinery, but life. A pulse spread across the ruins, flowing into the Aegis through his body. Through the stars, he saw flashes in his mind. Ancient humans walking among galaxies, building, laughing, loving, creating, then falling into silence. Lyra's voice echoed within his thoughts. "We didn't create you to serve us. We created you to surpass us." The ruins began to collapse, the moon splitting apart under the force of awakening. Mason carried Lyra back toward the ship, dust and light swirling around them like a storm. "Hold on," he shouted as debris rained from the sky, but Lyra stopped him, her hand pressing gently against his chest. "It's time," she whispered. "The message must go on." He shook his head. "No. You're coming with me." Her gaze softened. "I can't, Mason. My body was never meant to exist in this age." Her form flickered, light bleeding from her skin. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice now resonating in his mind. "When humanity looks to the stars again, tell them this: like they were not abandoned. They were waiting to return." She leaned forward, her forehead resting against his. "And tell them, I believed in them until the end." A brilliant flash consumed her body, breaking into streams of silver light that rose into the sky. Mason fell to his knees, reaching out as the light spiraled upward, joining the golden beams from the sentinels. The combined glow burst outward, spreading across the galaxy, carrying her voice to every corner of the void. "Rise, humanity. Remember who you are." Moments later, silence returned. The alien fleet was gone. The sentinels stood frozen once more. Their duty complete, the Aegis hovered in the distance. Engines flickering weakly but alive, Mason climbed aboard, his heart heavy but burning with purpose. He looked out the viewport one last time. The moon was gone, replaced by a glowing scar of light across the stars. A transmission signal blinked on his console. Coordinates. Old and human, he recognized them instantly. Earth. Lyra's final message had been sent there, a pulse of energy that would reach his homeworld within hours. He smiled faintly, whispering, "You kept your promise." As the ship turned toward home, the stars shimmered brighter than before. The galaxy was no longer quiet, and it was alive, watching, waiting for the species it once feared. And deep in the silence between worlds, a voice like wind over fire whispered through eternity. Humanity will rise again, and this time, the stars will remember. Humanity, awake.